Hi. I'm going to do a video on some of the ideas that I've recently studied, and these ideas are related to our current state of affairs in our current foreign policy, and the debate on whether or not an interventionist type policy is a good idea. And I've especially wanted to direct this to members of the LDS Church. So if you're watching this video and you're not a member, maybe you'll learn a few things about what Mormons believe about the justifications for war and whether or not an interventionist type policy is a good idea. So this is mainly for members of the church, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, my friends and family primarily. First, let's establish some common belief. We're going to go over some arguments on why that I often run into when talking to people about our foreign policy. And they seem to give a lot of common arguments in favor of an interventionist type foreign policy. An interventionist type foreign policy is such that it means that we go throughout the world for various reasons, and we seek out dragons to destroy. We put economic sanctions on countries. We get involved in border conflicts and wars and civil wars and all these things. And that's primarily what it means. The opposite, which is a non-interventionist foreign policy, is where we are strictly neutral, except when we are attacked. We take a defensive, we fight defensive wars when we're attacked. We don't seek out aggression around the world. We don't promote aggression or attack countries without them first attacking us. So those are the two ideas. But first, let's establish a common ground. These are some of the things that LDS members believe in from our doctrine. First, the Constitution was established by God. So in D&C 10180, it says, and this is the Lord speaking, "And for this purpose I have established the Constitution of this land by the hands of wise men, whom I raised up unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood." We are encouraged. So in that scripture, we learn that the Constitution was established by God, and that the leaders, the founding fathers, were raised up for that specific purpose. And we believe the Constitution, later in the scripture it says that it describes the purpose of the Constitution, which is to secure the rights of men. We believe our rights were given to us on merit of our humanity by the Creator, and we have the right to ourselves, to own ourselves, and we have the right to property, and of course liberty, which liberty means that you have the freedom to choose. It's your agency, right? You have the ability to do what you want with your property, so long as it doesn't take away or interfere with the rights of others. So I have the right to drink raw milk or whole milk, or I have the right not to exercise if I want to. I have the right to, it's not a good idea, but I have the right to, potentially do harmful things to myself. I own myself, and so long as I'm not hurting other people, I should have that right. That's the idea. So the Constitution also secures an amount of religious freedom, and we believe that with the Constitution was essential for the restoration of the gospel, because nowhere on earth had there been enough religious freedom where ideas such as Mormonism wouldn't be squashed by the establishment, by governments. So the Constitution is very important. And we as members are encouraged to support leaders who stand for the Constitution. In the October 1922 conference report, Charles W. Nibley said, "I believe, as the prophet Joseph has written, that the day would come when there would be so much of disorder, of secret combinations, taking the law into their own hands, trampling upon the constitutional rights and liberties of the people, that the Constitution would hang as by a thread. Yes, but it will still hang, and there will be enough good people, many of whom may not belong to our church at all, people who have respect for law and order, for the constitutional rights, who will rally around with us and save the Constitution." So there are a number of quotes. There's lots of quotes encouraging us to support the Constitution. There's lots of leaders saying that the day will come when the Constitution will be on the verge of destruction or hang by a thread and things like that. It's very important as a member of the church that we support those leaders who stand for the Constitution and the rights and liberties that the Constitution protects. So now that we've established that the Constitution was set up by God himself, and the founding fathers were inspired of God and raised up for the purpose of defending these rights, we can go into these arguments. And I want to be respectful, so I understand where these arguments are coming from. I held them myself. I argued these arguments in favor of an interventionist type foreign policy. And the more I've looked into it, the more I studied both what our scriptures and our prophets have said, the more I don't think that our interventionist foreign policy is a good idea. So what are the arguments? One, if we don't attack them first, they'll attack us here. And we don't want people to attack us here. I don't think we want people to attack us at all. It doesn't really matter where. Sun Tzu said, who is a famous Chinese general who wrote the book The Art of War, you may have heard of it. He said that it is said that if you know your enemies and know yourself, you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. So it's very important that we understand our enemy, we understand what motivates them to attack us, to oppose us. And a lot of people say that they attack us because we're free and prosperous. And if you think about that, every year, I think the Cato Institute publishes an index listing the top countries in the world according to their economic freedom. There was a point in our history where we were number one. We're not number one anymore. We've sort of lost our way. We are no longer the most free country in the world, and neither you can argue that we're maybe the prosperous right now. Things are probably going to change because we're no longer the freest, right? So the top countries on the list, Hong Kong's number one, Singapore, other countries like Canada. Canada is more economically free than the United States, okay? You don't hear those countries getting attacked, right? They're more free and prosperous than we are. Why aren't they also getting attacked like we are, right? A lot of people argue, well, we were just minding our own business on 9/11, and they came and attacked us because they hate our ideas, and they hate our prosperity, and they're jealous of our freedoms. And they want the power, they want the control. that may not be true. But we can't really say that. Do you know why? We can't really say that they attack us because we're free and prosperous, because they don't attack these other nations that are more free and prosperous than we are. Furthermore, we've been involved in Middle Eastern affairs since about 1950. Okay, 1953, we overthrew CIA sponsored a co-op of an elected leader in Iran, and we installed a brutal dictator. And that probably wasn't a very good idea, because for one, if we were really standing for freedom, really being a good example of freedom, you wouldn't install a dictator. Okay? You wouldn't sponsor dictators, and we do that quite a bit. So that, when we prop up these dictators and these dictators kill these people, that causes a lot of resentment towards us. Okay? Not because we're free, it's because we just installed a dictator that killed a whole bunch of people. Yeah. This idea that the reasons why they attack us are definitely misled, okay? There are definitely bad people that attack us, but they attack us because they're extremists and because we're over there, right? Osama bin Laden, know your enemy, right? What does Osama bin Laden say? He says that they attacked us on 9/11 because we were occupying their holy land. We had bases in Saudi Arabia, what they consider a holy land, and because of our constant bombing of Iraq, which we did for 10 years, and there was, the effects of those weapons on infants and babies. The infant mortality rate just went through the roof because of the chemicals from those bombs. And those are innocent children and women that have to suffer from that. And that incites anger, right? Maybe we're justified. But I don't, Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. So you've got to ask yourself, are those lies justified? And are we willing to live with the results of those deaths? And the CIA has the concept of blowback. And blowback are unintended consequences as a result of our intervention. So we put bases on their holy land. We don't intend to, but they resent that and they attack us. Okay, so they have lots of reasons to attack us. We should address. We should bring them to justice. If they do attack us, we have the right to defend ourselves. But we also need to do things to make us safe and not incite anger against us. And our interventionist foreign policy does indeed incite resentment and anger and hatred towards America. Okay. Number 2, evil will triumph if good men do nothing. This is true. I won't argue that this is not true. But who says that the only thing we can do is go in there with guns and bombs and blow people up? Is that really the only option? Like, can we do anything else? Is there something like, I don't know, what we did in our early history? We declared our independence from Great Britain. We fought a revolutionary war. We promoted this idea of freedom and liberty and rights and this democratic government where there was no king. We had this idea, and this idea was so powerful, right? There's a famous quote that says, "An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army." And this idea spread throughout the world, and there was nation upon nation declaring their independence from tyrannical governments. And it happened in France. It happened all over South America. It happened in numerous nations around the world. This idea of freedom created change, positive change in people. You couldn't do that with an army. You couldn't bring about that kind of change that quickly and that effectively with an army, with guns and bombs. It's the ideas that are very powerful. And we as Latter-day Saints believe in leading through example, right? We don't go throughout the world and force people to accept Mormonism or conform to ideas. We believe in being a good example, and by being an example of a prosperous and peaceful people, that people will be more interested in these ideas that we promote, which are very similar to freedom and choice and accountability and personal responsibility, things like that. So number 3, quickly, these conflicts bring about a lot of good. And this is true. We have a lot of good people in our military, a lot of good military leaders that, a lot of good people in our political system that do a lot of humanitarian efforts through our military around the world. And that is good. We should be doing that. But you need to ask yourself first, at what ratio of good to bad is war justified? Are these conflicts justified? For example, if you kill 1 million people, including any number of innocent collateral damage, but you rebuild a hospital, are those deaths justified? Maybe you build 10 hospitals. Are those deaths justified? Right? You've got to ask yourself these things and try to come up with the best decision for you. If you blow up a bridge and then rebuild the bridge with borrowed money, how have you really helped anything? Right? We're doing humanitarian effort. We're building a bridge. That's good. Yeah, but we blew it up, and we have borrowed money to fix it. So, to me, that's a wash. Right? It's more bad than good. Finally, wars cost a lot of money. These conflicts do a lot of good. This is the last argument against that. Wars cost a lot of money at the expense of the poor and middle class in the United States. We understand that wars are traditionally financed through either borrowing money or just printing it or through taxation. And all 3 of those things are bad for poor people. They're bad for the middle class. Austrian economic theory suggests that when you inflate a currency, when you print more money, increase the money supply, that it's more detrimental to the poor and the middle class, and you essentially transfer money from the poor and the middle class. You transfer wealth from the poor and middle classes to the elite and the wealthy, and dissolve the middle class. The middle class gets wiped out because the rising prices, and a lot of the poor and middle class don't have wages that keep up with inflation. So as we print and borrow more money or tax, then the value of the money goes down. Your purchasing power is weaker, and if your wages don't grow to accommodate that, then you're going to be buried. Eventually, there will be no middle class. It will just be poor and the elite. Okay, it's very, very detrimental. So you need to ask yourself, is all the good we're doing, is that all the good we're doing justify the amount of damage we're also doing, not only to the American people, but all over the world? Okay. 4, we need to protect our freedom and promote freedom around the world. So I've already mentioned ideas are way more powerful than swords. They bring about more change than swords and guns and bombs. So we can definitely promote freedom through our example. It's historically proven that it works. We just need to be more free and prosperous here, and we're kind of losing our way. And I say that we're less free here because it seems on a weekly basis we lose a little bit of our freedom, and that's how Satan. We understand Satan works. here a little, there a little, until gradually we're bound by the chains and we're dragged down to hell. Our freedoms are taken away gradually, little by little. So since 9/11, how many freedoms have we lost, right? Think about it. The government can spy on you without a warrant. They can read your email without a warrant. If you go to the airport, you essentially give up all your rights to privacy, right? You walk through the nude scanner. I remember on my mission, I had two batchmates that were Samoans, and they got patted down. They got their bags ripped open and searched through, and I was like, wow. And I didn't get that. I was, being a white American, I didn't get patted down or searched like that anyway. Or if you don't want to be X-rayed, you get groped inappropriately. There's also all sorts of racial profiling and targeting and things like that going on. It's unnecessary because TSA, they have stopped a total of 0 terrorist attacks. The 2 terrorist attacks since 9/11 involving airplanes, they were stopped by the passengers and the crew on the airplane, not by TSA. So this idea that TSA makes us safe, it's a huge inconvenience, it's a huge invasion of our privacy, it's unconstitutional, and it does no good. You're more likely, okay, we try to argue that, okay, these things are justifiable because it makes us safe, right? But the perception of safety is a delusion. It's an illusion, right? You can never be 100% safe. It's impossible. You're more likely to be killed in an automobile accident than you are by a terrorist. That's just a statistical fact. Okay? Should the government then be protecting us from ourselves? Should they screen us before we enter our automobile? Because we can kill people. Sometimes we don't intend to, but we kill people with our vehicles all the time. So this idea that we need to be protected from terrorists is not only exaggerated, but it's unconstitutional. In a free society, those kinds of things don't happen. Finally, American citizens can be assassinated. They can end up on assassination list and killed without due process. Okay, due process is in the Constitution. We believe that Constitution says that you as an American citizen cannot be charged. You cannot be held indefinitely in a prison without a charge and without trial by jury. You cannot be killed without a charge or without evidence that, and the president can now put you on this list and kill you. He doesn't have to show anybody a shred of proof that you've even done anything wrong. Oh, but the government, they would never abuse that power. They have to keep that information secret to protect who they're protecting. I don't know. We don't know what they're protecting, what information they have on these people that they're targeting for assassination, these American citizens. And it's a scary thought, right? It's an abuse of power. It's unconstitutional. Period. Okay. Last argument in favor of an interventionist foreign policy is, and this is a very, very important one, God put us in this position, therefore we have the moral obligation to weed out evil around the world and destroy it. Okay? So, first off, I would argue that, that God has never revealed that through our scriptures or our prophets. He's never told us that we have the obligation to destroy evil through a force of arms or aggressive means. Um, I've never read a scripture that would support that theory. Okay, and even if it were true, let's say that and there has been times God works through people, inspires people, like, for example, our founding fathers. He inspired them to do what they did. But don't you think God would do it His way? Like, we know God's way. He does things through revelation, and He does things through the law that He established. For example, He established the Constitution. Wouldn't He then, if we were to rule out evil around the world, wouldn't we at least declare war? Because that's our law. That's in the Constitution. We don't go to war without a declaration by Congress. And that's just not the case today. Our president goes to war under UN resolutions, which is against UN law, rule. The UN procedure says that countries that participate in UN resolutions should do so by having first been authorized by their constitution. In our case, we don't get authorization to go to war except through a declaration. Okay, so if God were to do it, He would do it through His law, which is to declare war. And we don't do that. We haven't declared war since World War II. We've been involved in numerous conflicts around the world. Okay, we aren't, and this idea that we're purely fighting evil around the world isn't true either. Like, we support probably more dictators than we overthrow, right? We indirectly helped Osama bin Laden defeat the Soviets. That probably wasn't a good idea. Osama bin Laden turned out to be a really bad guy. He killed more people than, more Americans than the Soviets did. Okay? And we supported Saddam Hussein. We encouraged his invasion of Iran. Saddam Hussein thought that he had our consent when he invaded Kuwait, but it was a misunderstanding, and we were buddies with Kuwait, and so, we retaliated against our buddy Saddam. We ended that friendship. And so we prop up these dictators, we install dictators, we give them foreign aid. We did that to Gaddafi. We gave him billions of dollars so he could remain in power for all those years, and then we spent even more money to overthrow him. And we don't even, in Libya, we don't even know if the new government's going to be any better than the whole last one. It's just, it does a lot more harm than good. We're schizophrenic on our foreign policy. We try and pick winners and losers. We have no moral standing with whom we give financial aid to. We give financial aid to dictators and people that are the complete antithesis of freedom and liberty and democracy, as we claim that we are. And finally, our founding fathers, who we believe were raised up by God, opposed, quote, seeking out dragons to destroy, end quote, around the world. Okay, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all opposed foreign entanglements and interventionism. Okay, we believe they were inspired men. Finally, our Doctrine and Covenants Declaration on Governments declares that members of the LDS Church denounce war and proclaim peace. That should actually put it to rest whether or not we support getting involved in wars around the world. We should avoid it at all costs, if possible, except in defense of ourselves, and it's not always the case. We're not always defending ourselves. Okay, we've got this idea that we can go in without a declaration and destroy them before they even have a chance to attack us, and this is just unconstitutional. It's a bad idea. It brings more bad than good, and there are different ways to handle the problem that don't involve spending billions on government. So that's all I have for this video. I will link to some additional resources, especially on presidential war powers and the military-industrial complex. The scriptures call secret combinations what we call today special interests, and how those special interests benefit from our foreign policy and from war. And that, I'll leave you with that. All right, thanks.